Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, October 25th, 2007. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. Well, this week, Jeff Bear from Craft Beer Radio joins us to give us a rundown of the results of the Samuel Adams LongShot homebrew competition. 3 homebrewers will be featured in a special 6-pack of Sam Adams beer, and the first round of winners was announced at the Great American Beer Festival a few weeks ago. Jeff was our reporter on the scene to bring us the results. If you're new to homebrewing and would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. Well, just a quick note before I forget. Again, I forgot last week. Maureen Ogle wrote me the other day to let me know that her book, Ambitious Brew, The Story of American Beer, is now in paperback. It's well worth the read, and now you can get it with a bendy cover. And of course, you can hear our 2-part interview with Maureen in our Basic Brewing Radio archive. So good luck to Maureen on the release of her paperback edition, Ambitious Brew, The Story of American Beer. A quick dip into the mailbag before we get into the meat of things. More suggestions this week about bottle labeling. They're still coming in, people with good ideas about how they deal with labeling their bottles. Brad from Warwick, Rhode Island writes, "By day, I work in graphic design and pre-press at a print shop, so we get tons of paper samples, and I did plenty of research before labeling my first brew. I ordered samples of different kinds of paper, all sticky back, or some refer to it as crack and peel, referring to the method of exposing the adhesive. Brad says, I filled bottles with water and refrigerated them, then removed them and let them sit and get condensation all over them. Some failed at that point. Then the ones that made it, I immersed the bottles in water and let them sit, mimicking an outdoor party where the beers sit in ice water, for about a week. The winner," says Brad, "was Starliner Teslin, Teslin, with a permanent adhesive. It did not peel off underwater or with condensation, but peels off in one piece," very important, he says, "in one swift motion. The way I do," Brad says, "is to create my main label on the barrel of the bottle that includes my brewing company's name and my clever auxiliary information. I then use a neck label made of the same stock to label individual brews and their descriptions. That way, when I'm drinking one, I peel off only the neck label, leaving the main label on. It stays on during sanitization and into the next bottling phase with no problems." And Brad finishes by saying, "You and all the listeners should be able to order this stock at any printer that uses a decent supplier. Just a note, though, I printed mine on a color laser printer that uses toner and heat to set the image, not ink that can run when wet. It's a good point. Inkjet printers, not so good when you stick the beer bottle in the cooler of ice." Shane from Wadsworth, Illinois writes, with this, "I really dislike having to soak off labels, but like designing interesting labels to identify my brews. Also, inkjet supplies get to be spendy when you're printing off 50 or more full-color copies. The answer was to make labels with good quality paper for the best-looking labels and affixing them to the bottles with binding plastic. This is that super thin, stretchy plastic that comes in approximately 7-inch wide rolls from home centers and many storage supply businesses. Trim the plastic with a sharp knife for a clean edge. With an assistant holding the roll and controlling the tension, stick it to the bottle and start smoothly wrapping. When you're halfway around, stick the label in place, catching it under the plastic, then continue wrapping until you're almost back to the label. The label will have only one layer over it." And Shane says, "Use a razor knife to trim clean." He says, "I know it's a little hard to explain, but try it, and after a little practice, you can have a very nice presentation. Plus, you can remove the label without ruining it, so you can use it on the next batch." Well, there you go. And maybe with the plastic over it, maybe it could survive a inkjet label. Maybe it could survive in the cooler. Appreciate that. Before we get into the interview, I do want to say howdy to some folks I spent some time with last week. I went down to my hometown of Hot Springs, Arkansas, to attend the premiere of a documentary called Brew Day. It was in conjunction with the Hot Springs Documentary Film Festival, which has become a pretty big deal in the documentary world. Ken Burns was down there with them a couple of years ago, I believe. Anyway, Brew Day was a film put together by John Lovett, who came up to the house and shot an interview with me, Philip Walter, who did the editing, and some other folks. And I have to say, it's a lot of fun. It's a fun little deal. And the only complaint I could say is probably too much of me in it. But it was fun to watch nonetheless. And I especially had fun serving homebrew afterwards and spending time with Larry Combs and Stuart Lay, who were the other brewers featured in the film. And after watching that experience, if there's one piece of advice I can give aspiring filmmakers, it's to serve free beer at your premiere if you want to get good audience reaction. Okay, before we bump into the time limit that I've set on myself, let's get on with our interview for this week. Jeff Bear of Craft Beer Radio attended the announcement of the winners of the Sam Adams LongShot competition at the Great American Beer Festival, and he was kind enough to come on to our show to share the results. Well, Jeff Bear, welcome again to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thanks for having me, James.
Now, we're talking over Skype, which is a wonderful thing, and in fact, it fooled somebody. Neil Sparks, who listens at the home brewery here in Fayetteville, said, you know, who are those guys that you had on the show last time? And you know, he was just amazed that you guys weren't in the same room. So...
Yeah, so Skype can do some pretty good stuff with sound compression. I did notice listening to the interview where usually when I said like an A syllable, it sounded like an A. It sounded like I was stuttering a bit. So
I thought it was just the fact that you had recorded a show previously before we went on the air. Well, it's just us on the line this time, so maybe we won't have the compression artifacts this time. But surely, if people listen to podcasts on a regular basis, they're kind of used to that kind of thing anyway. But it sure beats a telephone line.
Absolutely.
Well, the reason that I've asked you back on the podcast, and I want to give a quick plug to craftbeerradio.com. You and Greg do an amazing job tasting craft beers every week, and you've done some beer journalism, going out and covering events and going to the hop farm and going to the barley farm and the malting facility, and so you've made some significant contributions, I think, in the world of craft beer. But I wanted you to help me out in covering the world of homebrew. And so I asked you to cover the Samuel Adams LongShot competition out in connection with the Great American Beer Festival. And I appreciate your help in that.
Sure thing.
But give us some background on what the LongShot competition is.
All right. Well, the LongShot competition, I'm sure most of the listeners have seen TV commercials on it the last 2 years. They've really been promoting this thing. It's a nationwide homebrew competition that Samuel Adams puts on. They have regional judging qualification rounds. I know there's a judging in California. I think there's some in the Midwest and up in Boston for the regionals. And anyone can enter their homebrew. And they narrow it down. And at the weekend of the Great American Beer Fest, they announce the two winners. They pick two homebrewers, and then they have an internal employee homebrewing competition. And they pick one winner from that. And then they put out a six-pack of beer with two beers from each of the three winners. And you'll find that in stores, I don't know, coming up in the next couple of months, I would assume.
And then the winners get kind of a Wall Street Journal-style etching of themselves on the beer bottle.
Yep.
Now, I was amazed at the caliber of beers that were in that six-pack. There was a fruited wheat beer, which I thought wasn't, outstanding, but I thought it was pretty good. And then there was a Dortmunder and an old ale. And
those were three beers last year.
I was really blown away by the second and third one.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some people have the Samuel Adams prejudice, where they think that Samuel Adams is one of those bigger craft breweries, and they have to make more mainstream, more accessible beers to cater to a bigger audience, to keep up with their margins. And a lot of people were surprised that they picked an old ale, high alcohol, expensive to make beer for the LongShot competition last year. And I don't want to spoil the winners, but I'm going to say I think this year's six-pack, for my palate, is going to be more exciting than last year's.
Well, let's get to some of the entries here. First of all, you were able to catch the 3 employee entries down on the floor of the Great American Beer Festival, and let's just launch into the sound that you captured down there.
I'm here with Scott Cook from Boston Beer Company, the brewers of Sam Adams, and they have 3 beers here for the LongShot six-pack this year, where the people are tasting the beers and voting on them, and the winner's going to get put in the six-pack, correct?
That's correct.
So what are the 3 beers that you have today?
Basically, my own beer is a rye malted IPA. Then there's a Weiss beer with orange zest in it, and then there's a very unique grape ale. Give you a little try there.
Is this the rye IPA?
Yeah, this is the rye malted IPA.
Okay, yeah, get the rye malt.
Yeah, it's got a little more aroma. Used Hallertau Middle Fruit as basically an aroma hops to it, and it seems to me that the rye balances out the hops a little better, so it seems a little more crisp, not so bitter.
Hello, I'm good. This is Mike from Boston Beer. I suppose you brewed the Weiss beer?
Yes.
Could you describe it a little bit?
Sure. My dad and I brewed an orange-spiced Weiss beer. We used some bitter orange peel, 2 ounces in the batch that we brewed, added it in just before the end of the boil, and what it does is it balances out the sweetness of the wheat malt with a nice orange aroma, and you get just a touch of the citrus bitterness at the end of your taste. So it's incredibly refreshing and a little more complex than most Weizen beers that you find.
How would you say it compares to the Sam Adams Hefeweizen? I guess the orange peel's the big difference.
It's a bit different. It's a slightly different variation of a wheat beer. It's closer to what you'd call a Wit beer, something like a Blue Moon, but whereas a true Belgian Wit beer usually contains coriander, we use the bitter orange to give it just a touch of a different flavor. So it's similar, but it's a bit more complex than some of the Wit beers that you find for sale out in the general population. So.
Okay, now you're right. Actually, when I first smelled it, I thought I smelled more clove. At first, but now that I'm getting into it, it's smelling more like a Wit beer.
You get a little bit of clove just from the esters and the yeast that you get from this style of beer, but hopefully those are outweighed by the orange as you kind of take your nose in and digest it.
Absolutely. Okay, great. And the other beer is
grape ale. I'll send Lily over.
Okay. Yours is a grape ale.
It's a grape ale, yep. I love wine. Worked for Sam Adams for 14 years, but I love to drink wine. So I wanted to figure out a way to get grapes and grains together. So what I did was started the regular brew process and then got a bunch of grapes, probably about 4 pounds of grapes, and crushed them, sort of broke the skins and got some of the juices out, put them in a cheesecloth, and then used that as like sort of a giant tea bag after the boil was done. Put that in there, let it steep for a little while, and then right before I pitched the yeast, I added back in all the grape juice. So you get the juice, but it didn't cook and get sort of bitter like it would if you would have cooked it the whole time.
Did you go through any several iterations of it before you could get perfect use? This first attempt?
First time through was the winner, yeah.
Oh, that's very cool. Can I get a little sample of that?
Take a sip and then go over there and eat a grape. Seriously. And then take another sip and you get a totally different taste and you can really, really pick up the grapes in the beer.
I got the grapes. Absolutely.
It's subtle.
It's more subtle than like what Dogfish Head was been doing with their red and white. So it's different. It's a lot more subtle. It's probably a lot more appealing to a larger audience as well.
Yeah. And I think because I didn't boil the grapes or boil the juice. I just steeped it, so it gave it like a really nice soft touch.
It's a nice beer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, that was an interesting little collection of beers there. A rye IPA, a Weiss beer with orange zest, and a grape ale. So, they're not being very conservative in sticking to styles when they're picking out these beers.
Yeah, when it's a real judging. People are picking these beers. I'm not sure exactly the details on the employee judging, but I know when I was talking with Scott Cook, that he said, that Jim Cook, the owner of Boston Beer Company, had given them feedback on their beers and stuff. I think this was after they were already picked as finalists when they were brewing up their beers for the samples at the Great American Beer Fest. But, there's definitely some interesting styles that they're putting out in the hope for the LongShot competition.
I would like to taste the grape ale. I don't know if I would want it to win or not, but I think I'd rather do a rye IPA. Which did you get to vote?
I could have voted, but I never actually filled out a ballot. At the Great American Beer Fest, they had the Samuel Adams end cap booth, and right beside that around the corner in one of the normal booths, they had the 3 LongShot winners. And there was always a crowd of people there trying the beers, and I think they really liked, being able to give feedback on which beers go into production.
So did you get to try all 3?
Yeah, absolutely. I tried all 3. The grape ale, I'm not sure if you've had the red and white from Dogfish Head.
No.
It's one of their new specialty beers they put out where it has some grape juice in it, and it's aged in Pinot Noir barrels. And it was similar to that, but a lot more subtle, where the Dogfish Head one's really, really grape juicy or winey. This one had a very subtle hint of grape. And it's like they describe in the press release, it's a pale ale with grape juice added.
So which would you have chosen had you voted?
Depends. Actually, I talked about this a little bit with some of the employees. It depends on the time of day. When I tasted it the Thursday evening session, the rye IPA got my vote. But during the Saturday morning brunch, the rye IPA was too bitter for me, so I would have voted for the Weiss beer with orange.
Ah, well, there you go. Now speaking of Saturday, you got to go to one of the funnest things for me the past 2 years of going to the GABF is the Sam Adams brunch. And if it's like it was for the past 2 years, it's wonderful from a culinary point of view and also from a beer lover's point of view.
Yeah, they once we got in, they had a little buffet, eggs Benedict and some apple crisp, and I'm not sure what else there was. There was pancakes with blueberry syrup. I mean, it was a nice breakfast. I really, kind of wolfed down the breakfast so I could get out and about with the microphone to talk with the finalists, the runners-up, and everything like that.
Now, everything that they had, at least when I was there, all of the dishes had beer as an ingredient. So, you had, pancakes with beer and, eggs Benedict with beer and everything. And they also had the help yourself Utopias bar there with with the pre-poured snifters of the Utopias. Was the Utopias in force there when you were there?
They had the Utopias after the announcement. I saw some people walking around with snifters, so I went up to the bar and asked if they had any. And they had the brand new 2007 vintage Utopias out. And the last time I had it was about 3 or 4 years ago. And I think it's a much improved beer. They've managed to dry it out a little bit more, so it's not as syrupy and sweet. And I used to say, it's a really good beer. But even if, just to say you've drank the world's strongest beer, it's not worth anywhere near $120, $150 a bottle. Now, for the right situation, in the right situation, I think it's worth that much money if you can find the special occasion for it.
Like the celebration of the birth of a child or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, let's get on with let's go ahead and play your recording from Jim Cook of the Boston Beer Company in announcing the winners.
I'm Jim Cook. I think I know most of you, and there's a few new faces here. And I started Sam Adams 23 years ago, and have actually been coming to the Great American Beer Festival since 1984, and have watched it grow into really the premier beer event in the entire world. There is nothing anywhere in the world that showcases the variety and the gloriousness of beer like you see here at the Great American Beer Festival. And we take this opportunity to do something that is very meaningful to us and encompasses kind of the whole circle of brewers. And what we want to do today is a part of the Samuel Adams LongShot competition. LongShot is something that we started in 1996, and it is a way to try to bring to the American beer drinker great beers from homebrewers. And the point of that, among other things, is first to illustrate to beer drinkers that there are very, very talented homebrewers making really good beers that are worthy of their attention, and the homebrewing community is a great source of creativity and innovation in beer, and even more than that, that the roots of the craft brewing movement are in fact deep into homebrewing. Many of the pioneering craft brewers from back when I started and before began as homebrewers. And I think very few of you here who are enjoying the GABF and this wonderful cornucopia of beers, probably very few of you have any knowledge about how this all got started. But when I first came, the what is now the GABF was really the beer tasting at the end of the American Homebrewers Convention. That's what it was. The Homebrewers Convention happened. That was a very alive, vibrant organization, and they were kind enough to offer refuge to the sort of handful of crazies who were trying to brew interesting beers on a commercial scale. And actually, when I think back of the people who were at those very early events, which came out of the Homebrewers Convention, most of them didn't make it. So there was this weak, kind of faltering group of people who were welcomed really one place in the whole world. Distributors didn't want us. Retailers had no use for us. The press, thought we were this bizarre curiosity. And, of course, all the big brewers were happy to have their, feet on, or have their foot on our neck, if you will. But so we were not welcome very many places. But at the AHA, we felt like rock stars, and it was pretty cool. So I remember those days, and Sam Adams has been very fortunate. We've been very successful, and I always promise if we ever made it, we would be able to remember the people who welcomed us when nobody else did. And so this, in some ways, is an acknowledgement of that, and it's also a reminder to everybody who drinks good beer that homebrewers make good beer. And the third group of brewers here is maybe one you hadn't thought about, but it is the employees of Boston Beer Company. Most of our employees homebrew. 90-some% make homebrew, and some of it's very good. And so the last piece of that circle is the community of brewers within Boston Beer Company. And you'll have an opportunity to taste the 3 winners from our employee homebrew contest, and that winner will stand alongside in the LongShot 6-packs the 2 winners from the homebrewing community. So this is sort of completing a circle of not just professional brewers, not even just homebrewers, but Boston Beer Company people who hopefully work in a company where the roots in actual brewing run very deep. So that's what we've got here today. And I wanted to announce the winners from the homebrew competition. First, I wanted to thank some of the people who made it possible. First and foremost, that same organization that welcomed us 23 years ago, the American Homebrewers Association, because we could not have pulled this off without them. There were over 2,000 homebrews that were tasted to come up with these two winners. And also want to thank some of the judges who helped us pick these two winners that are here, Jason and Todd Ahlstrom, and Tony Porter, and Gary Glass. And it was fun tasting with all of them. I can't say we came to unanimity on it, but at the end we voted, and I think we're all delighted with the beers that won. And without going in, I'd just let the two winning homebrewers come on up here and introduce their beers. I guess we should start. Maybe we'll move geographically, Illinois and Rodney. Yep. Ceremonial mug. Mike McDowell. They made very different beers, a double IPA and a Wiesenbach. So one really from the West Coast IPA tradition and the other very authentic German beer. Congratulations. Would you guys feel comfortable just talking a little bit about your beer? Because these people understand what you're going to say.
Well, I'll go first. I made a double IPA. It's about a 9.6% beer. It's got a kind of a malty, sweet finish to it, but it's got about 100 IBUs to back that up, so it comes out fairly balanced. Obviously, it's a strong beer and very full, but I got a little bit here of some of the media. I want to give it a taste later.
I had a German Weizenbach. If you're not familiar with the Weizenbach, it's a combination of a Hefeweizen beer meets a German Bock beer. It's about 60% wheat malt, low hops, has a malt complexity from Munich malt, pure Munich malt, and the yeast gives it some clove flavors and some raisin and dark fruit plum.
And again, to just sort of complete the circle, let me introduce the three people from Boston Beer Company who had the three winning homebrews, and they are pouring their beers at our booth at the GABF, and the attendees of the festival are going to vote, and the winner will end up in a six-pack alongside Rodney and Mike's beers released commercially. And I would invite you to go there and taste them, and I think it will give you proof of just how good beers can be from people who are not professional brewers. I would put those three beers alongside all the other beers at the festival that come from commercial breweries with practicing brewers. It reminds all of us that the line between a practicing professional and a talented amateur is largely an arbitrary one that comes from our eyes, but isn't really anything more than an arbitrary line. And the three winners from Boston Beer Company, who come from very different parts of the company, Lily Hess made a well, I'll let you talk about your beer. Lily represents Samuel Adams. She actually has the largest territory of anybody in the company. She has Hawaii, Australia, and Asia. So she sells Sam Adams across a pretty good geography, though mostly in Hawaii.
I'm the one that everybody always says, if you ever leave your job, would you please call us? So I've been with the company almost 14 years, and to me, this is full circle for me, because I used to homebrew with my husband before I had this job, and we used to try to make our beer taste like Sam Adams Boston Lager, because we were too poor to buy it. So then when I got my job, I didn't have to homebrew as much, but then when we brought this competition back, it was always a really great, awesome challenge for me. And because I'm from Hawaii, I always try to do a fruit beer, and every year they're horrible. So thankfully this year, the grape, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to do something that I hadn't really ever seen done before. And in addition to beer, of course, when you work for Sam Adams Long, you also enjoy wine. So I wanted to combine my two favorite things, wine and beer. And as Jim put it, it's a great combination of the grape and the grain. And I want it to be subtle, so I hope you all get to taste it because I think it is a very subtle background grape flavor. And it's a pale ale, just a really traditional pale ale with the grapes brewed towards the end of the brewing process. So cheers, thank you.
Second, Scott Cook works for us in Pacific Northwest, calls on grocery chains, but he's also a dynamite brewer.
Thanks, Jim. The beer I made is basically a rye malted IPA. I'm on the West Coast, so I like the IPA style. I think that rye is a very underutilized brewing ingredient, and I think it adds a lot of complexity to the beer. So it's basically a triple hop rye malted IPA, and then I balance it out with a touch of honey. So it's a very interesting brew. I think all three of the LongShot finalists are excellent brews. I definitely recommend you guys to try them all. And just this experience to me, Jim, is just a fantastic experience. I've been in the brewing or the beer industry for a long time. This is a fantastic experience, and just having a better understanding of brewing and what it means to the industry and what it means to me has been a great experience. So I just wanted to thank you for it. Thanks, Jim.
And our third LongShot finalist is Mike Kramer. Mike works for us in Boston doing all kinds of financial analysis that I can't understand, but he does know how to do things in Excel, so I've always admired his capabilities.
Everyone has their niche. I brewed a Bavarian Weiss beer. My father and I came up with the recipe, and we made an unfiltered Bavarian wheat beer that's just got a touch of bitter orange peel added just before we turned off the boil. So the bitter orange gives you some nice orange notes in the aroma, and it balances out the sweetness of the wheat malt that we use. So it's a fairly complex beer, but still pretty refreshing. And for being here this morning, it's a great breakfast beer. So enjoy. But as Scott touched on, we're pretty proud. The three of us have spent a lot of time together the last 3 days, and 3 good beers in the LongShot campaign from the Samuel Adams group. And one will be the winner, but we've had a lot of fun. And we'd also like to thank Jim. I mean, this is as much fun as you can have as a finance geek, getting brought into the GABF and getting to pour your own beer and be here today. So thank you very much.
That's the final word. I'm very proud of all of them. They're all great brewers, and I'm really glad that Boston Beer Company has such good people. So thank you all for coming. Enjoy the beer. Enjoy the food. I'm done.
No, I thought it was really interesting that Jim gave the history of the Great American Beer Festival and said that it was basically, it started out as being an after event to the Homebrewers Conference. So homebrewing is really at the root of the Great American Beer Festival.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't there 26 years ago, but from what I've heard, homebrewing was a lot bigger than craft brewing was then, where I think the Great American Beer Festival had like 8 or 9 breweries there. Not so great. The title was a little bit misnomer, but they've certainly grown into the title after these last 26 years.
Well, they say if you say something loud enough and long enough, people will start believing it. And luckily for us, the Great American Beer Festival has kind of fit into its name. Yep. Now, luckily, you got a chance to grab the winners and then the runners up afterwards.
For these sound bites, I interviewed the runners up first, and I was going to get on to the next 2 finalists, and I ran out of time, and that's when Jim started his announcement. So it was coincidence that I interviewed the 2 runner-ups before the announcement, and then I got the two winners when I had time afterwards. I should be allowed to talk to you first since I was here before you were a famous winner.
Thank you.
So you don't have your name tag on, so I forget what your name is.
Rodney.
So,
Rodney Kibsey.
Okay. I'm here with Rodney, and I want to talk to him before he was a world-famous brewer.
Before I go call all my friends and say I won.
But Jim stomped on my parade, so now I have to wait, and now we can relish in your victory, though, so Congratulations.
It's so surreal.
I bet. I mean, I'm a home brewer, and it'd be so cool to be able to sell my home brew to people.
And what's scary is to see my picture on the bottle. My face on all these bottles across the country. And
well, it's like an artist rendition, so they could probably make you look a little cooler. I mean, if you feel that you're not cool enough. I mean, I'm not saying you're not cool, but
give me more hair. And
there you go, exactly. So tell me a little bit about how long you've been homebrewing.
I've been homebrewing 5 years to this month. Yeah, and one of my past girlfriends actually introduced me to homebrewing, which is kind of odd because the homebrewing community is pretty male-dominated.
Right, and then we want to ask about the beer since it's just one, but I'm going to stick with the same format that I asked the other guys. Is tell me a little bit about your homebrew system.
Oh, my homebrew system. It's kind of like a Frankenstein thing where you build and build and build, but it's I think I have a 12-gallon Polaware false bottom pot I use for mashing. I do 5-gallon batches. I usually brew like once every week or every weekend. I tend to have 12 to 14 corny kegs on tap at home. So my friends like me.
Wow, you certainly go through a bunch of tap space there. That's great.
And I know what beer I'm going to make next again because this beer was from last winter. So
okay. And then for fermentation, do you have any temperature control, or do you just use carbon?
I do mostly ales. I'm very impatient. I've did lagers before, and I ended up buying freezer chests to do lagering in, and I ended up just filling them with corny kegs because I couldn't wait 2 months for that beer to be ready. It's like you make it and you watch it grow and you're like, I want to drink it. I want to see how good it is.
Okay, so tell us about this beer.
Well, it's actually won a gold medal at the National Homebrewers Competition this past summer. And I've won plenty of ribbons and medals with it in other competitions. I've won best of shows with this beer. So it's one of the second beers I've ever brewed. So I've really worked on tweaking it and getting it to where I wanted it, and I think I got it.
That's great. Okay, I'm here with the last finalist and the second winner of the LongShot competition. We were hoping to get to you before the announcement, but Jim rained on my parade with, upstaging me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, took over your mic.
So we're here with Mike McDowell. He brewed the double IPA that won. And Mike, tell us a little bit about how long you've been homebrewing and a little bit about your homebrew system.
Well, I've been brewing about 11 years and doing all grain most of that time. I brew on a 15-gallon beer keg system. A lot of homebrewers are doing that. Been doing on that system probably the last 8 years, pretty much same system. Been able to calibrate it so I pretty much can predict the result from a given recipe.
Great. What about on the fermentation side? Do you have anything special on that side, or are you just using carboys, any temperature control?
I have 3 of the beer, more beer, stainless conicals, and so I'm able to produce a pretty good volume of beer when I need it. And that allows me to enter, a fair number of competitions, and I've done pretty well at that. So.
Great. Tell us a little bit about this beer. It's your double IPA.
It's a double IPA. It's a true, like West Coast style hoppy, big hop bomb beer. It's got 100 IBUs, 9.6% alcohol, and if you're looking for hops, this will help you out right here.
What are the primary hops used in the beer? What's giving it the flavor?
All right, the signature bittering hop in this beer is Warrior and Simcoe, and it's finished with a Cascade Centennial.
Anything else you would like to say? Maybe give a shout out to your homebrew club or something like that?
I definitely want to give a shout out to the Boston Beer Company for sponsoring this. It's just a big attaboy to all the homebrewers out there that entered and all those that didn't enter. It's just this whole event just brings the focus on homebrewing. It's just terrific.
And what do you think about having your picture on the bottle for the next year?
I'm not too crazy about that, but I'll get used to it. Somebody's picture's got to be on there.
Well, congratulations.
My dog's picture in.
What's that?
I should have set my dog's picture in instead of mine.
Well, congratulations.
Thanks
it's a really good beer.
Thanks a lot.
So first we're going to talk with Brad Warbiani and co-brewer David Jackson. And first give us a little bit of information about your homebrewing background, how long you've been doing it, maybe a little bit what your system's like. Some of the homebrewing geeks will really like to hear what kind of system you use. And then we'll talk about the beer.
We're neighbors from Atlanta. Both started brewing together in February '06. The system we have is all grain. It's a pretty simple system, 5-gallon igloo cooler and a 7.5-gallon boil kettle. Do all of our brewing outside because our wives make us. Do it out on turkey fryers.
Okay. And then for fermentation, do you have anything special on that side? Do you have any temperature control or just using carboys?
Just carboys at this point. Luckily, this batch was in the winter, so it was nice and temperature controlled in the garage.
Yeah. David, tell us about your entry for the LongShot competition, what style it is, and a little bit about its characteristics.
It's an American IPA that's it's nice and strong hop flavor, pretty up front, and got a nice smooth, clean finish on it. Nice creamy head. And
would you like to divulge any of the ingredients, what kind of hops were used or anything like that? Or
trade secret.
Okay, that's fine.
We actually, being from Atlanta, one of the hops we used is Columbus, also known as Tomahawk, and we kind of went for a theme. The Atlanta Braves have the Tomahawk chop. We've got Tomahawk hops. So we use Chinook for bittering and Tomahawk for flavor and aroma. Great. Anything else you'd like to say about your beer or to some homebrewing listeners worldwide? I just want to thank Sam Adams for having us here. And I definitely, for new brewers like us, I don't think we'd be where we are without all the resources that we have available on the internet. I think for new brewers, the online forums can teach you a lot that you would not find otherwise.
God bless Beer Advocate.
Now we're here with Dave Pobekevitz, who is one of the other finalists. I was talking with him a little bit earlier. He's doing a Hellesbach. But Dave, why don't you tell us a little bit about how long you've been brewing and a little bit about your brewing system?
I've been brewing for almost 12 years now, and the Maibach or Hellesbach style is one of my favorites, so I've had quite a few batches of that. My homebrew setup currently is 10-gallon pots for 5-gallon batches. Pretty simple. I do it in my kitchen on an electric stove. I ferment in. I've got deep freezers that are temperature controlled, so that takes care of that. And my style, the Hellesbach, it was actually pretty good because it was my second batch of that in a row, so it fermented out a little bit better. It was mostly a Pilsner malt with a pound or two of Munich. It was a Spaltz for bittering and Saaz for flavor and aroma, just a little bit at the end. So it all came out cleanly, and it was very yummy.
So you said the second batch fermented out a little bit more. I guess you repitched your yeast. Was it like back-to-back, so it was still active?
Yeah, exactly. My first batch, I actually put in almost 50% Munich, and it was a Maibach. And I figure I would just change it up a little bit, so I put in, instead of 50% Munich, I just threw in like 2 pounds. And I used the same exact hops, and all my gravities wound up hitting the same, all my pHs, everything was the same. So it was the same beer with the same yeast, just less Munich, and that was the one.
Okay, great. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Or if you'd like to give a shout-out to your homebrew club, and we'll go back to you so you can do that as well if you'd like.
Basically, I'd say for any new homebrewers, I would recommend finding a home brew club because there's so much knowledge to be gained from the other brewers that are willing to share and have you make good beer. That would be my number one recommendation. I'm part of the Defiant Homebrew Club in Pearl River, New York, and they've been here before and have actually won it, and there's plenty of guys that have placed in the finals with the gold medals and stuff for the last couple of years, so that's why I'm here.
Okay, very cool, Dave. Thanks for talking with us.
Thank you.
Now we're back with the first team, Brad and David, and we'll ask them about, if they want to talk about their homebrew club at all, give them some props.
In Atlanta, we weren't part of a homebrew club. I recently moved to California and just joined the Brew Commune Club in Orange County. So.
Now, I thought it was interesting that that all 4 of these guys, or 3 guys in one team, they mentioned kind of different brewing setups, but 3 out of the 4, I think, had temperature control on their fermentation. And then the 4th said that they were lucky and they brewed at the right time of year. I guess that's a good reflection on how important temperature control in fermentation is in home brewing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for the hobby, I always tell people it's easy to make good beer, and it kind of gets exponentially harder after that to make great beer. You can get lucky and make great beer, but to do it consistently time in and time out, you really have to control as many variables as you can in the process. And Mike McDowell, the winner of the double IPA, he's all out. He has stainless steel conicals and everything that are temperature controlled.
Now, did you get a chance to taste any of these beers?
Yeah, they were pouring the two winners afterwards, the double IPA and the Weizenbock. And they are both delicious beers. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm really excited about this six-pack because while last year's was good and, were styles you weren't expecting, this one is, it's the Weizenbock just knocked my socks off. Great banana, great clove, some caramel in there. And then the double IPA, rumor has it on internet message boards that's a Pliny the Elder clone. Seriously is. And they didn't tell anyone at Boston Beer until after they had won that this was a Pliny the Elder clone.
And, well, that's funny. And then the Weizenbock had won lots of medals in competitions, so it was a well-traveled beer before it got to the LongShot. Well, that's great. You certainly captured good sound, and I appreciate your help again. And there's a ton more stuff. What else have you got in store at Craft Beer Radio as far as the rest of the coverage for GABF?
Yeah, we have a special section on the website where there is over 5.5 hours of content. We have an interview. I got to sit down with Jim Cook, and we talked a little bit about the LongShot. And if you tune in there, you can hear where he says it's easy to brew a double IPA. He thinks it's boring, so that's why you don't see a Sam Adams double IPA. But he thinks it's really hard to brew, a Vienna lager style beer, kind of like Boston Lager. So you get a little insight on that. We talk about the Sam Adams pint glass, which is interesting. He talks about how he had all kinds of sensory panels and fluid dynamics engineers to help engineer this glass that enhances the flavor of the beer. Talk a little about Utopias and an upcoming glass designed specifically for Utopias.
Will it be as expensive as the as the beer? That's the question.
Probably not as expensive as the beer, but who knows? They might use some really fine crystal on it.
The gold inlaid shot glass or whatever. I guess it would be what would that be? It would probably be some sort of snifter or something.
Yeah, I'd presume it's probably a smaller, something designed to hold a 1 ounce sample, but snifters, a big bowl to capture the aroma, I would assume.
Well, excellent. I appreciate your help, Jeff. And
sure thing.
We will hear you on Craft Beer Radio.
Thanks, James.
Well, thanks again to Jeff. You can check out his show and all his hours and hours and hours of Great American Beer Festival content at craftbeerradio.com. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com. Or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. And while you're on our site, you can check out our online shop, where you can find great pricing on our DVDs and a combo deal to save you even more. In our first DVD, Introduction to Extract Home Brewing, we walk you through the extract brewing process step by step from boiling to bottling. And in Basic Brewing, Stepping into All Grain, we take you through the all grain process from milling your grain to collecting your wort. And I sent the master off to the replicator yesterday. And I'm looking at label art, approving that and stuff, for our third DVD, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing. So it shouldn't be long. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order it from us online. We'll send it to you ourselves. We also got shirts and hats, all that stuff. And also thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Supergirl Retro Ladies Fitted T-Shirt. Superhero Medium is the size, apparently. And Pipe Dreams, A Surfer's Journey. Thanks again, everybody. Remember, I can't tell who bought what when you click on the link, so don't worry there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping, and we appreciate your support. That's all until next week. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson, our buddy in Austin, who also designed our logo. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.